Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Claire with the Fiddle Leaf Fig Plant Resource Center, and today we are going to talk about top secrets from fiddle leaf fig growers. And I'm so happy that you've joined me today. We have a really special guest who's going to walk us through everything you've ever wanted to know about how fiddle leaf figs are grown, how to get a plant online, and different tips and tricks for growing a healthy plant. So I'm super excited to welcome our special guest, who's Steve Stanford. He's the president of plants.com with a Z, and he has the deepest knowledge of anybody that I've found on fiddle leaf fig plants, how they're grown, the best way to take care of them. And Steve is really going to walk us through everything that he knows today. So welcome, Steve, and thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, Claire, glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
So tell us a little bit about your background. How did you get into this? And, what is your education and how'd you end up starting your company?
Well, I grew up in Florida, and I went to the University of Florida and studied agriculture and horticulture on the premise that in the state of Florida, in the landscape industry, I'd always have a job in the green industry anyway. And so after school, I worked with some landscape companies, and at some point, a small company in Tampa became available for sale, and I struck on it. And that was about 16 years ago. And we rebranded it as Plants, Plantz, and have been trucking along ever since. So we are a plant leasing business in the greater Tampa metropolitan area. And as you know, we've branched out and are now sending plants by FedEx nationwide. So it's an exciting time for us, and we've gained a couple of tricks of the trade to help the plants survive the trip and get them into people's homes, big, bold, and beautiful.
That's awesome. Yeah, and we're so excited to have you here because it's taken us a long time to get to this point where we have a seller of large fiddle leaf fig plants that can ship to the lower 48 of the United States by mail. So we've been trying to find somebody like you for years. And the problem is the quality of the plants has really suffered when they're shipped. First of all, we'd be delivered plants that already had root rot or were dropping leaves or just looked beat up. Second of all, it's hard to ship large plants. And that's what a lot of people ask us for is I want a big plant, but I can't find it in my area. I don't want to pay a ton of money at a nursery. We had found one supplier that was charging $499 for their plants plus $100 shipping. And that was just too much. And so it's taken us so long to find you, but we're so happy that we did. These are two of the actual plants that you ship to us. And you can see they are huge. They look beautiful. They come out of the box looking gorgeous. And so we're just really happy to be able to offer your high quality plants at a really reasonable price tag. And so you can ship to everywhere, including California. You're certified to ship to California, which is really difficult to do because they have high hurdles for shipping plants into California. And so we're really excited to be able to offer these. So walk us through kind of your passion about plants and why you do what you do.
Boy, I grew up down in West Palm Beach, took my first job at a nursery that served Palm Beach Polo and Country Club, and I've been a plant lover ever since. So I had a very influential boss who convinced me to go to the University of Florida and study agriculture, and I've pursued that career ever since. So I enjoy plants. I enjoy what they do for people. I enjoy how people interact with them. And certainly the trend these days in biophilia is, that's people's innate attraction for other living things. That sort of concept is catching on nationwide, and people are more and more enjoying the benefits of plants in their homes.
Absolutely. Yeah. And what about fiddle leaf figs? What do you think about the kind of the trend of fiddle leaf figs and what draws you to those plants?
Well, they they are the biggest, boldest statement that you can put in your house. We also sell market ship palm trees, rhapis. We sell a nice line of dracaenas, but for whatever reason, the aspect of the fiddle leaf fig has not lost its luster. It has been the go-to plant for half a dozen years now. And I've really been looking for it to slow down, but it's not. People want them. They're big, bold, beautiful, and people are just attracted to their boldness, I believe.
Absolutely. Yeah. And people maybe have a hard time if it's your first ever houseplant. Most people who buy a Fiddle Leaf Fig, that's their first houseplant. And so sometimes they can run into trouble because, I don't think they're a difficult plant to grow. And that's kind of what I teach on my website is that they're not too hard to grow, but they're also not the easiest plant. It's not a Dracaena, it's not a pothos. So, there are some things you need to look for when buying a plant. And I tell people that the best thing you can do to set yourself up to have a good relationship with your Fiddle Leaf Fig is start with a healthy plant. Because if you already have one that is beat up or has root rot or is dropping leaves or looks unhealthy when you bring it home, it's just going to be a frustrating relationship, and it's not going to be something that's going to build your confidence, and it's not going to make you happy when you look at your plant every day in your home. So walk us through what we should look for when we're buying a Fiddle Leaf Fig.
Well, of course, you want find a plant that's going to fit in the space that you want it in. It's not a very up and down plant. It's not something that you can cram into a small space. It needs room to grow, so you need space for it, and you need well lit space. And I can't emphasize that enough. The main issue with people bringing these plants into their homes is not getting them enough light, and they fail. And if you can get them enough light, and I know we're going to get into the watering in a little bit, but the light and the water are the two key things that you need when you get it into your home. But buying it, certainly you want to look for the shape. You want to look for anything in the root system. A good way to check the root system when you're buying a plant, if you're in a plant shop, is you can lift the plant out of the grow pot, and the root system is nice and firm, and it keeps the shape of the grow pot, and you can see the roots. You can see the white tips of the roots. That means they're actively growing and don't have any fungal problems or rot issues.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. And you and I were talking about light a little bit before this, and it's interesting because, you say that they're grown in the shade where you guys grow your plants, but the reality is that the shade of a nursery is much brighter than anybody's home, right? So that it's South Florida, there's tons of light all day long. And you were saying that it was about, I think you said 50 to 60% of full sun when it comes to how much sunlight these plants are getting in the nursery when they're grown. Is that right?
Yeah, that's about right. They start out as small plants, generally in full sun, and that's to get them to grow to a marketable height as quickly as possible. And then they're finished off in shade, so they're somewhat acclimated to lower light conditions, but they are not acclimated to purely indoor lighting, unless you're supplementing it with some grow light. But yeah, they again, they start out in very high light, and they're acclimated in the greenhouses to handle somewhat lower light conditions. And I say that with a bit of trepidation because they still need to go in a window where they're getting some direct light every single day.
Right, yeah, and so when we say low light from greenhouse, that means the brightest light you can possibly give your plant in your house, and so without putting it in direct sun. And one thing that I thought that you gave such a great tip that I've been thinking about was you said, if you want your plant to eventually go in a certain area, that's fine, but you need to acclimate it there. So when you first bring it home, maybe don't put it in its final destination. When you first bring a plant home from the nursery, put it in the sunniest, most bright indirect light place that you can put it in your house and let it slowly acclimate. And then you can move it over to, a little bit darker place. And I did this with one of my plants that is a beautiful plant I've had for probably 10 years. It now lives in what is kind of a dark corner of my house, but it took me a long time to get it there, and it's acclimated, and now it's doing just fine. It's not growing, but I don't want it to grow, and it's happy there. So, think about when you bring your plant home, don't put it to its final destination. Still put it in a sunny spot and leave it there for a few weeks and kind of do a transition. I thought that was such a smart tip that you gave. So give us a little bit, it's one thing to buy a beautiful plant at a nursery, but what about buying a plant online? How do you know what you're going to get? What do you look for online? And how do you figure out how, whether or not shipping is going to damage the plant?
Well, I'll start with the shipping part. And, sometimes we're lucky, sometimes we're good. We do have packaging experts, and all our plants have gone through the FedEx drop test. So it's all good, except for I mean, we've had Fiddle Leaf Figs run over by FedEx trucks. We've had them delivered upside down. So there is some variability in the shipping. And, with us, if it comes damaged, we replace it. So, that's you got to be dealing with a reputable company that's going to replace a damaged plant, even if it's not our fault. So we start with a good solid plant from a great grower here in Florida, and we store them at our warehouse, our greenhouse, and I put my eyes on each of them and make sure they've got the shape and the attributes that'll do well, and then we box them up and ship them out. But when you're buying online, you just got to do some research on the companies that are selling them and make sure you're getting what is billed on the website.
Absolutely, yeah, and I have kind of a horror story about my birthday last year. I spent the most money I'd
Oh
ever
boy.
spent on a plant, $350. I got a variegated fiddle leaf fig, and I felt so bad because my dad actually bought it for me. And it shipped through the mail, and it got to me, and it had one leaf left, and the leaf was extremely damaged. It looked like it had gotten beat up, and it died promptly. And I kept it. I'm still trying to revive it. And it's been almost a year. It hasn't happened yet, but it's such a regret to spend that kind of money on a plant and to have a bad experience. So it's worth, investing in a plant that comes from a reputable grower. And so I definitely recommend not wasting your money because it can be kind of a heartbreak when you do.
Well, that variegated Fiddle Leaf Fig is in the right spot if it's under your care. So I have all the faith in the world that you're going to bring it back to its former glory.
Right. So yeah, walk us through, when you're looking online, it's sometimes tough to choose the right size for your space. And you guys have a lot of different plants, fiddle leaf figs available on your website. So you have tree forms, you have bush forms, you have smaller ones, bigger ones. Walk us through some rules of thumb for how to pick the right size for your space.
Well, of course, the larger plants, they need space immediately. You can grow the plant into a larger size, but I think generally people buy them at the size that they want them to be when they're, considering the decorating elements in their room. So the variables on buying a fiddle leaf fig is pot size, and generally they're available at least through us in a 10-inch grow pot, a 12-inch grow pot, and a 14-inch grow pot. And when I refer to those grow pot sizes, that is the top diameter of the grow pot. So generally you use that to determine what size decorative container you can put it in. And generally, the bigger the grow pot, the larger plant it supports. Now on the form, as you mentioned, there are two forms. You can order the bush form, which has the leaves that persist all the way down the stem of the plant, pretty much to the bottom where the grow pot is. Or the more popular version is called the standard tree version, or sometimes just the standard version. And it looks more like a tree. It's got one stem that comes from the grow pot, and then all the foliage is supported on that one stem. But there is some brown stem or trunk that is visible, but it is the most popular of the forms.
And so these are the same species, right? They're the same species, they're just pruned a little different.
Boy, I tell you, I'm going to guess that most of them are genetically identical. Yeah, it's a Ficus lyrata, and with the tissue culturing these days and how they're started out, I suspect they're very much genetically the same. So yes.
Almost identical little clone plants, and they're just pruned differently. And you can, of course, one of the cool things with these plants is you can prune them and shape them and get them, you can try notching to try to get branching where you want it. So, over the lifetime of the plant, it can be a lot of fun to shape it into something that's really special and something that you've helped create. So talk us through when your plant comes. First of all, one thing that's really important is if you do buy one of these giant plants through our Ultimate Fiddle Leaf Fig bundle that we'll talk about a little bit later, it's really important to try to be home when the plant arrives because we don't want it sitting in the sun. We don't want it getting hot or cold. So it's important to track your order through FedEx and be there when your plant arrives. But beyond that, what should you do when you get your plant home?
Well, get it inside and out of the box as quickly as possible. Sometimes, we ship, it's a day long shipping. Sometimes it can take 5 days in transit. But as you can imagine, it's not nearly an ideal environment. It's getting no sun, it's getting no water. So you want to make the great escape. And that's usually when people get most thrilled about a fiddle leaf fig, is when you get a very linear box in the mail and you open that box up and this big giant bushy tree pops out, and within just a few minutes it's spread out to where it's gonna have its form.
Yeah, and it's awesome. We actually have a video that I'll link below where it's an unboxing video of one of your plants, and it looks like those, artificial Christmas trees. How you can put them in these tall, skinny boxes, and then you open it up, and it's a giant Christmas tree. It's almost like that. And so, yeah, you can unbox it, and it turns in this huge, beautiful plant. And it's amazing that you guys are able to fit them in the boxes that you do. So one of the reasons that we really partnered with you is the unique way that you guys include a self-watering reservoir that we'll talk in a little bit, and that helps the plant survive better in transit. And so that's one reason that your plants do so well in the mail. And so we're excited to talk about that. And just to jump into watering in general. So walk us through how to water properly and how you guys water your plants.
Well, we talked about the light. Getting the light right is the first thing, but watering is a close second. And I think we've implemented a system with our plants that allows the plant to enjoy the proper moisture, then dry down, moisture, then dry down. You wet the plant, you wet the soil profile, it absorbs the water, it dries down, it restores the air to the soil so the roots can metabolize. And so the system we use is it's a sub-irrigation system that we branded Plant Assure. And it's a very simple system that involves creating a reservoir beneath the plant by putting it up on sort of a little pedestal. And I think we've got a slide for that. And then using capillary wicking material to deliver the water into the soil profile. So there it is. There it is. So you can see the wicks are inserted into the grow pot holes. There's a PVC, a cut PVC pipe that goes in the bottom of the liner. And then the plant, the grow pot is placed on top of that, and the wicks are tucked down in the bottom of the liner so they can absorb the water from the reservoir that we've just created below the plant.
Yeah, and this is so cool because this is, we get hundreds of emails each week from Fiddle Leaf Fig owners with problems, and generally it's due to overwatering or problems with their watering. And people are frustrated. They don't know if they're watering too much or not enough. Usually they're watering too much, but you've really taken the guesswork out of it, and you've protected these plants from overwatering because they sit on this pedestal that keeps their roots up and above the water, and then they can absorb the water they need through these wicks. And it's just a genius system. I'm so excited about this. It helps your plant grow better. When you get the plant, there's no need to repot it. All you do is water it in the way that Steve's going to talk about, and you can be assured that your plant's getting perfect water. And not only that, but it protects it during its journey of shipment. And so I think this is just such a cool system that you guys have come up with, and it takes the step out of repotting your plant as soon as you get it. So talk to us about when you should repot your plant, if ever.
Well, back on the watering issue, as you can see, the ideal setup is in a grow pot with drain holes. And one of the huge mistakes people make is getting their plant, getting a nice decorative planter from Home Depot or somewhere, and they plant it directly into the decorative planter without any drainage. And all that's going to do is every time you water, the excess water is going to pile up on the bottom of the soil profile and just stay wet the whole time, and that leads to root rot and problems. So um, we don't recommend a whole lot of repotting. Now, if you do have an ideal environment for your plant and it's actively growing and you want it to become bigger, there's only in a 10-inch grow pot, there's only so much soil profile and root system that can be supported in that environment. So you want to give it some more. So that if you have a situation where you can grow your plant and get it to go bigger, then you pot it up and you use some nice a nice soil and pack it around the existing root ball and pot it up. But generally, I don't think people are doing that. I think they want the plant to be about the same size it is when they get it, and it should be able to maintain in the grow pot that you get it in for years. So I hope that helps, but we don't do a whole lot of repotting, or we don't recommend a whole lot of repotting with our plants.
Yeah, that's really helpful advice. And one thing that people don't realize is you can keep your plant in the grow pot and fertilize it and sustain a lot of growth that way. That way it's getting nutrients, it's
Oh
getting
yeah,
water. And so you don't necessarily need to repot into a larger pot to make your plant grow larger. In fact, putting a plant, repotting it into too large of a container can cause it to retain too much moisture and actually introduce problems. And so we recommend, especially with Steve's plants, keep it in the grower's pot. You're all set up with your self-watering mechanism, fertilize it, but don't start fertilizing it right away because these plants have been fertilized during growth, right? So walk us through when they should start fertilizing.
yeah. So in production, we mentioned the sunlight and how they're started in full sun. Well, they're pushed by the growers with nutrition. So the NPK is pumped in the soil in the form of salts, and those salts can persist for several months after you've purchased the plant. So what I'm suggesting is that there is already nutrients in the soil profile when you get it to sustain it for the first several months that you own your plant. And then generally about 6 months, maybe 3, 4, depending on how much light you've got it in, you can start it on a nice nutrition regimen. And I know you've got a nice product that works well, and it's specifically formulated for our ficus liratus. So it's a real nice way to go, and you can add a very diluted solution to it each time you water, and the plant does very well with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And you and I have talked in the past about the different fertilizers that are available. And we were talking about why it's so important to use a liquid fertilizer. So, first of all, you don't want to ever over fertilize your plant. And I see this a lot when people use tree stakes, which is a solid fertilizer, and then maybe they use granules, which is another solid fertilizer. Slow release granules are tricky because you don't know how much fertilizer they're releasing at any given time. And so you don't know how much is left in the soil. With a liquid fertilizer, you know exactly how much you're giving your plant, and you can use our fertilizer every single time you water. So it's formulated so that it's diluted. You can use it every time you water, and there's no risk of burning your plant. And Steve was telling me how, with solid fertilizers, they really can burn your plant by absorbing the water, pulling the water away from the roots, and actually starving your plant to death in its own pot if you use them incorrectly. And so that's why we developed a liquid fertilizer to make it really foolproof and safe for your plant, so you know exactly how much it's getting. So, I think the key
Yeah,
is wait 3 to 6 months and make sure to only use one kind of fertilizer and stick with it so that you're not going to be combining different slow release and hard and soft fertilizers and overdoing it with your plant.
yeah. To reiterate, you really can't produce a burn with liquid fertilizer. It's spoon feeding the plant the nutrients it needs, and it's absolutely the way to go. The granular fertilizer, you mentioned the burn. The burn is it's just the salt pulling the moisture out of the root system and making it look like a burn. So that's what fertilizer burn is. It's the water leaving the root system instead of going into the root system, caused by the salt that's adjacent to the root.
Yeah, yeah, and so that's a great advice there on how to fertilize your plant properly. So walk us through, what should you do if you do have problems? I know it's important to act quickly if you see any signs of problems, but what's your best advice for new plant owners?
uh, Almost 95% of the problems we see is when plants aren't getting enough light. If you've got it where it's getting enough light, you won't have any problems with it. I say that, and if you're messing up the water, and that's going to contribute to problems too. But for the most part, if you get the watering right and the light right, you're not going to have any problems. The problems happen when one of those two things aren't right, and generally, it's not having enough light. You'll see brown spots on the leaves. If you're watering improperly, it'll drown the root system, and it'll also cause some spotting on the leaves. So just get those two things right. You shouldn't have any problems. I will mention too that because the leaves are so big, they can become dusty. and it's a good idea to periodically wipe them off with a damp cloth. You can use a light soap solution to clean the leaves. So if you're cleaning it periodically, the plant should look bright and vibrant and last a very long time. So I think I skirted around some problems that people have, but I'm telling you, if you get the two elements right, light and water, you won't have any problems with this plant.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what we like to see because it can be heartbreaking. If you start to see brown spots on the leaves, you want to act quickly because those won't ever recover. And so you have to either remove the leaves or look at the brown spots for the rest of the plant's life. And so we do have a root rot treatment. So if you start seeing signs of root rot, which could be, brown spots, dropping leaves, black spots, things like that, you want to address the problem first. So correct the drainage and correct the light situation. And then we have a very powerful root rot solution that will stop the infection in its tracks and help your plant recover. So you can check that out below as well if you're interested. So talk to us about, these are indoor plants. We want to make an impact on the look and the feel of our home. So one of the things that really bothers me is I see these beautiful plants in someone's home and they're still in the black grower's pot, which is fine, but that's not necessarily the most aesthetically pleasing thing. So talk to us about how to style your container and add something to make it look great in your home.
Well, it is an important element to styling it correctly and giving it the finishing touch. And I agree with you. I've seen pictures. People get the plant in their home and they try to set it up in the grow pot, and you've got this beautiful plant that's adding style and oxygen to your air, and then you just lose it when it's sitting there in a black grow pot. So you got to get the right decorative pot. And again, I want to emphasize, you do not direct plant these plants into a decorative container that doesn't have any drainage. So you want to get when I mentioned the grow pot size, 10 inch, 12 inch, 14 inch, you want to make sure that the inside diameter, a lot of people advertise their planters with a top outside diameter. But as you can see in the slide here, that gray planter has an outside diameter and inside diameter. And what you need to focus on is the top inside diameter to make sure it exceeds the size of the grow pot.
Absolutely, yeah. And so for these big plants that we're selling on our site, so they're about 15-inch diameter of grow pots. So what would you want the interior to be? Would it be, 16, 17 inches?
Yeah. Look for 16 or 17, because with the Plant Assure sub irrigation system, you want to be able to have some visibility into what's going on down in the liner. So you want to understand how much water's in the reservoir. So you need some peak room. You need to be able to scooch the plant aside and take a flashlight and look down there and see how much water you got in it. So I do note that, like the gray plant, it would look, it would improve its looks with some nice gray moss or some reindeer mood moss, something to give it the finishing touch to hide the grow pot from any view. And
Right,
we do
absolutely.
offer that.
Yeah, and you guys have a lot of decorative accessories on your site, which is cool. And I'll link below some pots that will be appropriate for these big trees that you're selling. And so I will measure them and link some different variety of options for you guys that you could just buy on Amazon so that you can have, a grower pot that you just place directly inside this decorative container. It already has a reservoir, so it's not going to leak. It's self-watering. It's set up for success. So you just put it into a larger container and it's going to look fantastic in your home. And you can even swap them out. So I have tons of Fiddle Leaf Figs in my home and I swap out baskets and pots for different seasons or different rooms. Or if I want to change up the look of my living room, I'll, swap out the container of my Fiddle Leaf Fig. And so it's just a fun way to keep changing the look of your home for the seasons or for your style or for your preferences. So have a lot of fun with your decorative container and make sure to give your Fiddle Leaf Fig the finishing touches like Steve mentioned. So yeah, so
Yeah.
Steve, walk us through some tips and tricks. Give us your final best tips and tricks for success for, owning not only Fiddle Leaf Figs, but all houseplants.
Um, Geez, have I driven it into the soil enough that water and light are the two most important things? So, I mean, there are plenty of plants that you can buy for interiors that don't require as much light as the fiddle leaf fig. So, if you want to plant in your home in a corner, it's not in a corner that's not adjacent to a window. It's not right for a fiddle leaf fig. You know, my tip is get the light right, get the watering right, give it a good wipe down every now and then, and you should have a happy, healthy plant.
And what are some of your favorites? Because of course, all of the people listening, they have fiddly figs, but they probably have a lot of other houseplants too. What are your favorite houseplants for dark areas? I have a lot of dark corners in my home, but of course I want to plant in every corner of my home. So what are your go-tos for dark areas?
The go-tos are the dracaenas. So they grow in the understory of rainforests, and they're naturally acclimated to lower light. But the Dracaena marginatas, we sell a Lisa cane, which is propagated and grown in Hawaii, and it is a very, very elegant, beautiful, tall plant that can be impressive in pretty low light conditions.
Absolutely, that's great. And what are some of the hot houseplants you're seeing? What do you think kind of the next fiddly fig is going to be?
Oh boy, the growers are trying to bank on that one. Right now there's another ficus that's been on the market for a couple of years, the Audrey, and
Hmm.
it's getting some traction. It's got a leaf that's a little bit bigger than a Benjamina, but certainly smaller than the Fiddle Leaf Fig, and the Daniela also is another ficus that's selling well.
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of Ficus Audrey. One plant that I'm seeing, I know everybody wants a variegated fiddly fig, but they're not easy to grow and they're not easy to find. So an alternative to that is a variegated rubber plant, and they are so cute. They look beautiful. I
Yep.
have one right next to my fiddly fig, so I'm betting on that as well as the
Yeah.
monstera. That's kind of the hot thing I'm seeing.
Yeah, the rubber plant, as you probably know, is just another fight. Well, not just another fight. It's another ficus, so it has similar characteristics, but it can handle lower light conditions. And you remember, anytime you buy a variegated plant, you are buying a plant that has less chlorophyll in its leaf. So generally, if you're getting a variegated plant, it's going to need more light than a non-variegated plant.
Right. And that's sometimes when you see a loss of variegation, it's due to not getting enough light. Is that accurate?
Correct.
Yeah, so sometimes you'll get, a big pothos or something that used to be variegated and then it turns all green. That typically means it's not getting enough light. If you give it more light, you can bring out some of that, more of that variegation. But I love variegated plants myself. You can actually get a variegated monstera. I don't have one yet, but that's the next plant on my list. So I
We
want
don't have one on our site, but I'm going to I'm going to look for them just for you, Claire.
Awesome. I would love to see it. I think it's going to be a new bestseller in 2020. So let's talk about
Okay.
this ultimate Fiddle Leaf Fig bundle. This is so exciting. So you can save $25 if you go to fiddleleaffigplant.com. You can get these large plants from plants with a z.com, and these are Steve's plants that he has put his eyes on. He has given the seal of approval. They're beautiful. They're shipped via FedEx. They're 5.5 feet tall. They come in 15-inch grower pots. They're certified healthy. If not, he stands behind his plants and gives a guarantee. This also comes with our Fiddle Leaf Fig plant food and a copy of our book, The Fiddle Leaf Fig Expert. And so this is everything you need to grow your plant and to know everything there is to know about growing your plant. And so check out the bundle. Go to fiddleleaffigplant.com/bundle and you can save $25 on that. We're super excited to be partnering up with Steve. And everybody listening can enter to win a free Fiddle Leaf Fig tree. And so this is one of these big plants. It's beautiful. We're going to ship one winner a full bundle. And so share this webinar on Instagram and tag us. We are at Fiddle Leaf Fig Plant Resource. Steve, what's your Instagram tag?
At fourplants.com. So it's at the number four, PLANTZ.
Great. And
Skip
we'll
the
link that
.com
below.
part.
So please share this webinar if you enjoyed it on Instagram. Tag us. Everybody who listens to it can save $25 on the ultimate Fiddle Leaf Fig bundle. And one lucky winner is going to get the bundle for free. And we're going to ship that out at the end of this month. So thank you, Steve, so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. And it was a lot of fun speaking with you.
Claire, have a green day. Thanks for having me.
I like that. Thanks, Steve.